Are you ready?
Ready.
Are you sure?
Yes, recording. Mm-hmm.
Let me mute all of my distractions. Mute all my distractions, David. Did you ever watch Schitt's Creek?
No. But everyone says I should. Which usually makes me not want to watch
I was going to
it.
say, I'm not going to say that because that's just going to push you far. Don't ever watch Schitt's Creek. Watch every other thing before you watch Schitt's Creek.
That's a better approach.
No, but for everyone else who's not Abby, if you're not watching Schitt's Creek, you should. You need to be. It's fan-fucking-tastic.
Okay, good to know.
All right.
Tip of my hair.
I think it looks fine.
Yeah, put it in a ponytail at 5:30 this morning and didn't. It still looks the same way, so there you go.
It's a good look. It looks like you're living a real life, Abby.
I am. That's
Well,
very
then,
true.
accurate. Your hair looks very accurate today. How's that for a compliment?
Or something like that.
You look like you are who you are. Take it or leave it.
Good to know.
Authenticity. Welcome to the True North Podcast, where two practicing light workers get together every week to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind and soul and spirit so that you can follow your true north back to your true self. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby.
Yes, you are. That's accurate.
It is accurate. Very accurate today. Still me.
Still me. I'm still me. We're still us. And y'all are still y'all. Y'all.
Yeah, exactly.
So are we doing humbility today?
I really want to make that a new word. And
I think you already have.
here's the thing. Oh my gosh. So when a word is said wrong and it gets me all confused, I have this tendency to just keep continuing to say the wrong word.
Like you just get locked in on it?
Yeah. Like my wife calls the game, so you have to think about it now. Taboo. Mm-hmm. You know that game? Well, whether you know it or not, the game is called Taboo. She calls it taboo. She
Taboo.
like emphasizes it different. So now I go around saying taboo when it's taboo.
I put the emphasis on the second syllable, but there's still also a very strong
Yeah.
Like I call it taboo. That's not taboo.
Taboo.
But taboo sounds like I'm just being weird. Is that how you call it? You call it taboo?
Well,
Y'all are both saying it
probably
wrong.
doesn't. It probably doesn't roll off that way. But since I'm like explaining the story
Taboo.
and I'm really trying to focus on
Exaggerating
getting it right. And so this is that same thing. I have been talking about humbility, all week, and I just keep coming back to that word. I'm like, don't say that on air. That is not a real word. It is not a real word. Don't say that. And now, of course, I'm gonna say it. So for the record, I know it's not a word, but if it comes out of my mouth,
because that's the only word.
Yeah, just let it go.
We're making it
We're gonna make it a thing.
I mean, we may as well start making up words because our confidence episode, we started off by acknowledging the fact that you and I have different definitions of that word.
Yes.
So maybe humbility could be the merger of your definition and my definition of humility.
Perhaps.
I do have special lingos with all of the people in my life who have like a significant presence.
Well, there you go.
Okay, so what do you got? What do you got for humility? I'm not going to say humility. It's only going to be humbility.
Oh, geez. See, this is really going to screw me
I'm going
up.
to mess you up.
Okay.
Saying humility is now taboo.
Okay. Yeah. No. So I don't remember. What was the last thing that you said? Confidence is.
Okay.
It had
So
something
last
to
episode
do
it
with,
was confidence is a gateway or a prerequisite to humility.
Yes.
And what I actually was really a better way to have said that was in my book, confidence and humility are two sides to the same coin. It's really impossible to have a true version of one without having a true version of the other. So at least that's like according to how I define confidence. So.
Mm-hmm. And then I went on and said,
And then saying, I don't think people should be humble. And then said, don't quote me on that. There's more, but we're out of time. So,
but wait, there's more.
Here's the more. This is the more.
Here is the more. I think that humility is falls into one or one of two camps. Like I just believe that humility is not defined and practiced in the way that I think it's meant to be. So when I see humility in people, I see it either being used as a way for people to kind of inflate their egos. Like they want people to think they're humble. And so it's like this false humility. Yes?
Okay, sorry, continue. I just got really confused and then I think I caught up with what you were saying.
Okay. So, well, this is why I don't think people should be humble. There's two reasons, because I think this is generalizing, but people fall into one of these two camps that I'm about to describe when we're talking about humility. This is what I've seen. Okay. This is what I've seen in my practice. This is what I've seen in people. So this is my opinion solely. So I think either number one, people are looking for this external validation. They want to be accepted. And so there's this external drive to be humble, right? And humble is not humility. I don't know if I can do this.
This is amazing.
Fucking said that word.
Seriously, you said it unironically that time.
Humility. See what I'm saying? I'll be right in the middle of something serious and I whip out a word that doesn't even exist.
It exists now.
Am I red? I'm really embarrassed.
No, you're fine. Your hair looks great.
Woo. Okay. So I think people want to be humble because they want others to consider them as humble. Like it's a good thing to be humble. So I'm going to just practice that so that you think I'm humble and it somehow inflates my ego that I'm a good person or I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
That's a wrong way to be humble.
So when you say people shouldn't be humble, you're saying they shouldn't do that.
They shouldn't do that. Correct. But then the other side of it, number two, is that I think humility is often too quiet for those that are truly humble. To me, it feels more like they're not speaking their truth. Like being humble means that positive confidence that we were talking about last week sort of gets lost in humility. Right?
So you can't humbly speak your truth?
You can't. No, because to me, when I think about what being humble means, is it means just not being noticed.
So meekness, smallness, modesty, less than.
Modesty, I think would be a good, not necessarily meekness. You can be humble and not be meek, but
just kind of making yourself smaller. Mm-hmm. Well, while you've been talking, I've been looking up the word humble and kind of some synonyms to see if I can pinpoint what it is I think you're describing. Because earlier, like last episode, you were talking about how there's two different types of confidence, and one is the good kind and one's the bad kind. And it's kind of the same thing here, right? Bad kind is when you're trying to exude confidence without having confidence, which I define as just arrogance. Like that's legit what arrogance is, when you're trying to do what confidence looks like without having confidence, right? So it sounds like what you're saying is there's one type of humility that's, well, I don't know. There's a type of humility I see you describing where someone's trying to act like what society says humility should be, to try to garner that social acceptance and that validation, right?
Yeah, and that's a mask.
Right. And if it's a mask at all, regardless of what word we use, that's something that you need to ask yourself why you wear and what good it serves you and does it still serve that good and all that stuff. When I think of humility, the reason I say it's the other side of confidence is that confidence to me is knowing precisely what you are and accepting that. And humility is knowing precisely what you aren't and accepting that, which are kind of the same thing. It's kind of a glass half empty, half full thing. Like one of the things that I said was confidence is being able to say when you can't do something, right? And I would also say humility is being able to say I can't do something without then worrying that it's going to mean something bad for you, right? Like to me, that's also humility, is just knowing your limits and saying this is past my limits, or this is past my sense of self, or things like that. Like, because I feel like the antithesis to humility is also arrogance. It's also trying to make yourself bigger, trying to make yourself falsely more of what you think you should be. And humility is just understanding what you are and not pretending to or feeling a need to be anything extra than that. If someone calls on you to be more than what you are, humility is just the ability to say, no, I'm not that.
And I feel that humility is not being proud and not being able to accept your accomplishments and accept who you are. Because if you've been humbled, I feel like that means in some way you need to strip away your confidence.
Been knocked down.
Yeah, like you need to get off your high horse if you've been humbled. And I don't.
Yeah.
But there's, I mean, this goes back to the confidence piece. Like, because in one way, yes, I'm saying be proud of your accomplishments. If you've done something great and you're proud of that, that is the confidence in the love and light that I'm talking about. Now, if you go on and you share that and you walk around and you're arrogant and you want people to know that, then that's the wrong side of confidence. But I just feel that when people are humble, they're not really owning the work that they've done.
Okay, so yeah, like, yes. When you... I think that's that false humility you're talking about. Like, if I do something great and everyone's like, this is so great, I'm like, no, it's not. That doesn't read humility to me because you're still denying yourself. And you're still, like... You know, it's almost like an aversion to liking yourself because society tells you don't like yourself. Don't talk yourself up. Don't toot your own horn. Let other people toot your horn. And then when they do, untoot it. Like, fight with people when they try to build you up because that's what you're supposed to do.
Well, then
Otherwise,
here's another example. Here's another example then. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Let's say that there's a kid walking down the street. And there's another man just randomly walking down the street, right? And all of a sudden, this man observes this kid, because he's younger, walking out into the street. He looks like he's going to be hit by a car. The man comes in, kind of saves the kid, right? Gets him off the street so that way he's not hit by the car. Everyone declares him a hero. He's like, wow, this man, you know, just did the kindest thing and saved this boy from getting hit by a car. This is a totally random example for the record.
This didn't actually happen. Well, maybe it did. I don't know. But yeah,
you know, and then like, you know, maybe he wins like an award from the city, or maybe, you know, the news interviews him and he's like, I'm just an ordinary person. And, you know, I would just do what anybody else would do. And to me, that's the, like, he's being humble. Like, I'm just no different than anybody else. And to me, that's the piece that I'm talking about, where like it is more than just, yeah, he is just a stranger and he doesn't know this person and maybe somebody else would do the same thing. But the fact that you love human nature that much, the fact that you care about another human being enough to put your life in danger and get him off the street, get this kid off the street, to me is something to like honor and something that should be sacred, right? And it feels dismissive to just say, yeah, I'm just another man. Anybody else would do it, or.
So maybe you're intuitively like picking up the thing behind the thing. Like because now we're venturing into real territory, because there are people who do heroic things and then they play it down, right? Mm-hmm. That happens, and it may be that you're seeing through to the intent, because there is an intent there that could be very kind of like this false humility where you're just playing it down for some self-serving reason or for some dismissive reason, which could be your own shadow side showing. But they're also, like, I've known people who are just really matter of fact about all the decisions that they make. We're like, oh, this is just a thing that seemed like the right thing to do, so I did it, and it doesn't go beyond that, you know. And I mean, you could also just be acknowledging that, what if that kid grows up to be Hitler? like is it really a good thing, or is it's just a thing that I did? I just decided I needed to do it, and I did it, and that's the end of it. Like, you can celebrate it, you can vilify it, and neither of those affect me. To me, that's humility. I almost said humility. that's humility, and that's confidence. You know?
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm explaining myself very well today. I'll be honest with everybody. My brain is totally fried today. So it's probably not coming out in a scripted way.
Because all we're doing is like talking semantics anyway. We're just like, here's the definition of this word. But
Yeah.
like, what's frying your brains?
Oh, I just have major work overload right now. I have like a list of things this long, see my hands, and time about this much to do it all. And they're all due right now. So I'm just like in this major brain fog, staying up till way too late. This is not important. Other than to say that I'm not on track today. I realize I'm not explaining this very well.
Well, actually, this is really helpful because you're the second person I'm telling this to. I just entered a second round of I don't want to call it interviews, but I applied for a job and then I got the email and they were like, you made the cut. Now do this project to show us your chops. And so I'm entering into a place where if I get this job, it'll be a remote editing gig where they send footage and I edit it and I send stuff back, which is time consuming. There's just no way to edit well without just sinking time into it. And I'm also entering the last leg of the semester of school. And I'm in 2 studio classes. And so both of them are just like, I have nothing left but one big assignment due at the end of the semester in 5 weeks. And everything between now and then is just do the thing. It better be done on time. There's no checks and balances. There's no little checkpoints, you know? And so I'm looking at this thinking, is this a good time to take on a job right now? Like, I feel really good about where I am in my semester. You know, normally by this time of the semester, I would have given up on one class at least, and I have just owned the fact that I'm behind on all the other ones. But my normal response to being behind is to procrastinate and avoid, exacerbating the behindness, which then exacerbates the avoidance until I either just fail the thing completely or pull through at the last second and do the thing where you wait until the last minute and then do magic, which sometimes works out and sometimes doesn't. But now I feel like I paced myself really well. I feel like I'm in a good spot with all my projects, and I'm just chunking out my time and spending it wisely and you know, staying ahead of things, and even to the point where I feel so good that I'm ready to add this thing into the mix if they do hire me for this job. And last night I was just laying there thinking, like, man, am I just gonna have to not sleep for a while? Like, is that the only, like, I only have so much time, you know? So it's actually, I perked up when you said that you have this much stuff and this much time, because my next question is, how do you manage that? Like, what's the plan? What's, for people who are in my position or your position or feel up to their eyeballs in stuff, like, what do you do?
Well, if I knew that, I'd be doing it. Just kidding. That's a horrible
Which is
answer.
why you're just losing sleep. That's the end of our episode.
What kind of life coach is she? Well, first, in my experience, when I get overwhelmed by my to-do list, I am constantly fighting being in a state of fight or flight or freeze. I typically just freeze. And so I go into this whole episode of like analysis paralysis, and I will just spend way too much time just trying to think about what I should do first. And so there's a couple of tips that I use to kind of get myself organized enough to kind of make a plan. And so the first thing I do is just make a list of everything that I have to do. And everything, and typically it's like a month out long list, because all of that stuff seems to be pretty hot, because there's a lot of planning that has to go into it. And then after that, there's sub lists. So like one thing might have 10 sub things that you have to do just to get that one thing checked off your list. So I really just, for me being visual, I want to just see it all. I want to know exactly what it is on the plate. And then I go through, and I think we've talked about this before, where I go through my 3B system.
That sounds familiar, but I'm drawing a blank.
And we may have talked about it a really long time ago. No. So I'll just talk about it again, because who knows what episode that was in. But the 3Bs are bag it, barter it, and better it.
Right.
BBB.
Yes, I do remember this.
So the first one is bag it. So basically that means what on your list can you totally get rid of? Like, because sometimes we think we have to do things, but if you really look at them, you don't.
That's one of my favorite questions to ask is, do I need to do this?
Exactly, right? And so
Yeah,
for me, because I kind of, like right now I'm putting together this 21-day stillness challenge that starts April 1st. And it's a free challenge, and I set an intention for myself, like not to spend a lot of time on this because it's just something that I want to do for fun. It's something I started on a whim last year, but yet I will get stuck in this. It has to look like this perfectly presented class. When last year, literally, I just got on live and said, hey, I'm going to be sitting down every day for 5 minutes. And it worked and people joined. And so I get caught up in really overthinking and trying to make things perfect. So when I went through at least that particular item on my list and all the sub items that came with it, there was a lot of things once I sort of sat with it, like, does it really have to be that polished? I was able to take a bunch of stuff off of it when I kind of brought that back in check. But obviously there's some things that you cannot take off of the list. So I am submitting a very large proposal to a very large school district in the area that's due in a couple of weeks, where I'm going to be proposing doing some year-long training for them. And it's a lot of really fine details, and it's a lot of bureaucratic paperwork. Thanks. And so like that has to be done. Like for them to even like take my bid, I have to have that paperwork done. So I can't bag that, obviously. So the next thing is on the list is barter it. And that means, okay, it has to get done, but can someone else do it for you? Is there something else that you can trade to do it? And so in this particular case, there's about 20 some forms that have nothing to do with what I'm proposing that I have to submit. And at the bottom of each one of them, because they don't do it electronically, I have to manually write in my name, my business, my address, blah, 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 like all this just generic stuff on every form. So an example of barter would be, who can I get to write this information in for me? Right? It has to be done, but it's something that, you know,
the rote stuff that anybody can get paid to do. Yeah.
Here's my address, here's my name, fill this in for me. So that would be an example of bartering. And you could either, you know, I used to like do this where I would trade a coaching session to get something in return if it were something bigger. And otherwise, like in this case, it would just be asking my wife, asking my friend who's, you know, willing to help to kind of do that for me. So that would be an example of barter. Something that still needs to get done. You're just finding somebody else to do it. And then, so I'll go through the list, make those asks, or see, you know, is there any way I can get this off my plate in some way? And then the third one is to better it. And better it is tricky when you feel overwhelmed. So it's this balance of just, you know, using the tools of breathing, of staying present, coming back into my body to keep myself out of freeze. But then when I'm present, bettering it simply means like going through the list of what I have left, that I haven't bagged, that I haven't bartered, and then prioritizing. That's typically first started by date, when it's due, the stuff that requires the most legwork. And then I go from there. Like, okay, is this something where I have to do this? Can I go work outside? Because being outside keeps me grounded. Being outside keeps me happy. Spring is one of my favorite seasons. So can I go work outside in a park? Better it might be, I don't necessarily need to be totally hyper-focused. So let's put on some really good music. Better might also be rewarding yourself. Like, okay, I'm going to work in this 2-hour chunk of time, I'm going to knock it out. I'm going to get as much knocked out on my list. And then I'm going to go reward myself with XYZ, you know, whatever is a good incentive for you. So that's kind of how I start to work through everything. But then that doesn't mean that I really make any more time, right? I'm not opening up time for myself because that's not in my control. But what I do find is when I have scheduled breaks and when I can go through and organize it in that way, and then I give myself rewards, I give myself some time, even though I feel like I can easily get caught up. Figment, my lizard, can say, you don't have time for this break. You shouldn't be walking the dogs right now. You need to be sitting at your desk. But when I don't do those things, I will come back and stay in that cycle of analysis paralysis. So I'm still not doing anything. And I will be more productive if I take the breaks, if I give myself the rewards and the incentives that I've set up for myself. I will actually get more done in less time doing it that way. So that's kind of my basic process.
I love everything you just said.
Well, thank you.
That is a good refresher. and that's very helpful. And it reminds me that I don't have to do everything. One of the things I learned at my last job was just because it's on my plate doesn't mean I am the one who has to do it.
Right.
And that's huge. I mean, like we don't really like asking people for help, so I like that it's a bartering thing. But sometimes you can offload something.
Sure.
And also what that does is it kind of gives you a lot of constraints that kind of choke out any chance you would have of getting in your own way. Like the system kind of does it for you in a way, and you are still the hands and feet of the system, but it's almost like you don't have to decide to do it because it's been decided for you. So then it's just a matter of, it's like having a boss that you have to answer to, but just you're the boss. But it kind of, you put yourself in that position, you know, where, because that's the thing for me is like everything I do, I have to decide to do. And then next time I do it, I have to decide to do it again. And it's the going from not doing it to doing it that is the biggest task. Like one thing I heard this past week was people think they need to start running. And so then, you know, they imagine that they're going to go run, but then oftentimes the reason they don't isn't because they don't like running or because they can't. It's because he was like, if you could fast forward to the part where you're in the street with your running shoes on and the water bottle strapped to your waist and you're about to run, if you could just teleport there, everybody would go running. But it's getting from sitting on a comfortable couch in your PJs to that spot. That is where the heavy lift is. And so my thing that I've done, that I've started doing once I realize that this is like, because my big thing is my ADHD gets in the way, right? People like to act like a victim of their ADHD, saying my ADHD is the reason I get distracted, but I don't get distracted if I don't want to. I have to want to get distracted. I don't admit that to myself, but I go looking for it. You don't accidentally go to Facebook. You type it into a browser or you open the app on your phone. That's something you do. And when I don't want to be distracted or when I'm super focused, it goes the opposite thing where I'm hyper focused, and then I don't think about anything but the thing I need to focus on, you know? And so like you can enter that zone really easily. You just have to want to. And so for me, my thing when I'm overloaded with a bunch of stuff is size it up, scale it down, and schedule it all. Which essentially is, size it up just means, like you said, make a list and assess
inventory.
What do you have to do and when does it have to get done. I got a planner and it worked for a year because it was new and exciting, and new and exciting are two crucial ingredients to get me to lock in on something. Where it took your goals for the year and it broke those down into, you had to like break it into 4 big steps, and each of those is a quarter, and then break each of those into 3 smaller steps, and each of those is a month, until every week you have very easy doable things, right? And it worked for a year, but then the next year I was like, oh, I have to do all that again. And then it's kind of fell off the plate because it got overwhelming again. But it was good to break it down into chunks. And so size it up is just, what do I have to do and what does it take? What does it actually take for me to get this across the finish line? How many steps are there? How many things are there? And can I spread those out? And then the next is scale it down. Where does it really take that many steps? I learned, as a creative, this is huge. I learned that the people who did special effects for Lord of the Rings movies, they had so much to do in so little time that their goal was to shoot for 80% of what they would call finished. Because every artist knows this. You make art and you have to just decide that it's finished one day, because if you don't, you're going to find more stuff you can do on it and it'll never be finished, right? Like no art is completed, it's only abandoned. And so you have to call it done at a certain point, and that's just you deciding not to work on it anymore. And so these people, those special effects were the best that existed for the time that they were released. And that was with people going at 80% of what they could have done. Because if they got things to 100, they would never hit a deadline. They had to hit deadlines, so 80% is fine. One of my projects this semester, I looked at the scope of what I wanted to do and what it would take to do that. And I was like, this doesn't fit within my time frame. And so I've just decided in that moment to take a B. Like there are 3 assignments. This is not the biggest one. If I get A's on the other ones, it's fine. I'll still make an A in the class. And even if I do make a B in the class, I'll still make an A for the semester because I have 2 other that I'm acing right now. And even then, once you get the degree, you don't enter a job interview and they ask you like what your GPA was. Right. Like you have a degree, you don't. And so I decided to get a B on this assignment and shoot for a B's level work. And then all of a sudden, so much time opened up. Just because I decided not to try to do my best. Which is a fucking hard lesson to learn as a creative, right? It's so tricky to be like, hey, Ryan, don't fire on all cylinders this time. Don't do the very best you can. It's not like I have to defend my title as a knock everything out of the park person. You know, like my professor's opinion of me doesn't have any bearing on what I think of myself. I don't need to impress her here, you know? There's not a lot riding on me. Like, basically, there's no difference at all in how any of this plays out if I go for an A versus if I go for a B, except for the fact that I have more time with a B. So I did. I shot for a B, and I got my B. Got a solid 85, and I'm super happy with it because that's what I was going for. And I got more time to play with my kid during that assignment, right? So scale it down. Size it up, scale it down, and then schedule it all. I have a calendar. I keep looking up here because I have a calendar on my wall. And I legit will make appointments with myself where during this block of time, just like I've silenced my text for the recording of this podcast, and after this, I have blocked off time to produce it and to get it uploaded. I have blocked off time with the name on it of a certain project saying by the end of this time, I want to have this much done on this project. And I have it all planned out so that at no point do I have to decide what do I do now.
Right.
What do I do with my time? That's been decided for me. It's on the calendar. It took me maybe 30 minutes to plot out the whole thing. And now if I do what's in the time slots, everything gets done on or before when it needs to get done to the degree of satisfaction I need it to be. And then overwhelm just doesn't come into the picture. Because at any point in time, I'm not carrying the load of all of it. I'm carrying the load of a piece of a piece of a piece.
Yeah. I schedule it out as well the same way. And what I do is every Monday, the first thing that I do in the morning is I kind of call it my admin back office time. And I basically look at that list and I plan out the entire week of content of like work periods, like scheduling it out by the hour, exactly like you're talking about. This is what I'm going to do in that hour. This is what I'm working on. And so that for me has been incredibly helpful because you're right. Then I don't show up saying, okay, what do I need to do? And then have this huge list in my head and having no idea where to start. It's like, I've already done it. I've already taken the time, but I like for me to do that every Monday because then I can give myself time to adjust. So if for some reason something didn't get done as well last week or better, then I can adjust for this week. Like I kind of have a general idea for the month what's going to happen, but then each week on Monday morning I come and sit with that and kind of make the time. And that's been helpful as well. I mean, it sounds like I'm taking away from work time, but it's organizing it and making it more efficient. There's another system that I started using for blogging too, and I love it. And I've considered using it for just tasks, but it's through a platform called Trello, and it's basically software where you can go in and you can write out. For me, what I do is each column is like a month. And then under that month, I can plug in, I do about 2 blog posts a week. So I'll plug in 8 boxes underneath that month for all the blog posts that I'm going to do. And then I can go in and I can write, okay, this one is going to be on gratitude. This one's going to be on some coach related thing. This one's going to be True North related. This one's just going to be about my life. And I can go through and then I like categorize them. And then after that, I go through and I think I can kind of process about what I'm going to write. And so, but it's really incredibly helpful because then you can go in and make notes within each post. You can make checklists within each thing. You can put deadlines on there and that'll email you reminders like your deadline to do XYZ is due in 2 days, and it's just been really efficient. And I thought this would be really nice for a big, it's basic project management. It's kind of what it is. But I just like to see it visually. So then, especially if I go in and say, okay, today I am just working on this proposal, I can literally just go to that column and go through and be like, I've already made out in there, the list of priorities and what has to happen first before the next thing. So
that reminds me, there was a time that I was employed to do, I was in a credit repair company and I was just processing people's credit reports and making decisions on what should happen with them, having zero training or experience in the world of credit, by the way. And we were measured by something called UPH, which is units per hour, which is just how many credit reports did you get filed and done in an hour. And my numbers were pretty low, and I wanted to know why. So I created an Excel spreadsheet to track it. But then I got really into that spreadsheet. I spent like a whole day working on it. And what I'm spending my time doing and where are my breaks and all that stuff. So I could find inefficiencies. But then I found that the one thing I was spending the most of my time on was my tracker spreadsheet. Just And so
Well, there is that problem.
My master output was, what do I need to stop doing to make more space to do the thing? And it was, well, this. And so now I have an aversion to anything that even looks like a dashboard or a project anything that's more complicated than a calendar with my own handwriting. I'm like, oh no, because then I'm going to spend more time managing my projects than doing the projects I'm managing. And you know what I love about the fact that we're talking about this on the True North podcast?
What?
I have gotten so much feedback from people who want to start meditating, or they want to start gardening, or they do want to start doing something active or fitness or something to get their body moving. All these recommendations that we make to like engage in some spiritual practices, even a stillness practice. Like there's that quote, I think I've said it on here a couple times, each time attributing it to somebody else because quotes aren't real and no one knows who said them, but it's that you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes a day, and if you don't have time, you should sit for an hour. And the one big pushback I get from people, well, I get two. One is, how do I follow my true north if I don't know who I am? But then the other one is, where do I make time to do more stuff? How am I supposed to meditate when I have blah, blah, blah going on? How am I supposed to go jogging or do yoga or whatever? You know? And I oftentimes I'm just like, well, I don't know how to answer that without just saying, okay, what is everything on your plate? Let's dig in. But even then, a lot of times, either that's personal information that people don't need to give to a stranger, or it takes time to then go and take inventory of all the things that take your time. And it's hard to like engage with that, because then your brain goes to all the other better things that you could be spending that time on. And then you just get wrapped up in the cycle again, right? It's hard to sit down and meal plan when you have laundry to do, and it's hard to fold laundry when you have to sit down and meal plan, and et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things I like about the fact that we're talking about really designing your life is that if people have found their way to our podcast, that usually means that there's something about their life that they would like to be different in the direction of living a life that's more authentic to who and what they are, that's doing meaningful work that they want to do to make a difference in the world, or just kind of like being able to let go of commitments and time sucks that don't really align with who they are. But it seems like a lot of what this world offers to those questions is more stuff. Do a mindfulness practice. Sit down and do nothing. Do nothing. That's scary for a lot of people who only know how to do all the things. You know? And so what we're talking about here is take all the things that are on your plate, ask yourself if they need to be on your plate, and then figure out a way to make them take up as little of that plate as possible.
Well, this is interesting that you're bringing this all together, because I think about what that takes sometimes to take things off of your plate. It requires asking for help in some cases, especially if you're married and you have a family. So then, you know,
there's guilt there.
Right. But then there's also having that confidence that we talked about, to be able to know that like you're worth that time. And so the ask should not feel selfish, but it does sometimes for some people, and understandable. But also you might not be in the safest relationship either, where you're going to get pushback, and that's going to be a problem. Where they will
make you feel selfish for asking for something.
Yes. So, I mean, that is a big ask to go through and see what you can take off of your plate. That's scary for people sometimes.
Yes, that's a good point. It does require you valuing yourself. You have to be able to say, I'm worth not being run into the ground with everybody. And the other thing is boundaries, too. Like we talked about last time, how I went through a period where I just said no to everything.
Yeah.
It's like everything on everybody who wants to put something on my plate. No. Because I was trying to break a habit of saying yes to everyone who wanted to put something on my plate always. You know, I would go to my employer and say, hey, I'm feeling really overworked and burnt out. And they would say, well, sorry, that's the life. That's the job. That's what you signed up for. Everybody on your team, you're not special. We're all burnt out. We're all overworked. We all make it work. You know, I sat in the office of my boss's boss with this at one point, and the answer was, well, when I worked in New York, I saw my kid one day a week.
So,
like, as though to say, well, so you should be okay with seeing it. Like, I get it, but that's not what I want for my life. You know, and that's a big part of why I don't work there anymore. You know, and that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to say, have the self-worth to say I deserve this type of life. I want this type of life for myself, and it's okay to want that. And then to go make it happen and to set up boundaries against people who try to keep you from building that life for yourself. You try to impose their will for your life onto your own life. And then just to be discerning and confident in being able to say, no, I don't want to add that to my plate. Or even harder, to go to someone and say, hey, I know I agreed to putting this on my plate, but it doesn't match who I am, and I'm taking it off. Yeah. Oh, that's hard.
Yeah, sometimes it requires that you to make the choice to burn it all down. Right?
Yes.
Have you heard the saying before, if you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen?
I've heard that before. I don't know if I've ever called it like a saying, but yeah.
I get told that a lot, and it pisses me off.
If you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen.
Because it makes me feel like the story that I tell myself is that that it's just not valuable enough to me. Right. And that's not, it doesn't always feel true. Like the example that comes to mind is, I have this book in my head that needs to be written, and finding time to write out of everything else I want to do without just taking a sabbatical off of everything and just sitting down and getting this thing out, is just not in the cards right now, especially if I want to keep up with my mental well-being. So it's like, I already get up at 5 a.m. to exercise, to meditate, to write, to read. So it's like, that's not an option. And I kind of go through all the list of things, and then I'm told, well, if you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen. And I'm like, well, this is interesting. How am I going to make this happen? And to a certain degree, like there's even authors I've heard say the same thing. Like, if you want to write bad enough, you will. And, but I also think though, that when you say that, it's dismissive of what that's going to require, which is going to have to burn something down. Like for me right now, to do that, I'm going to have to burn something big to make the time to write this book. And that, you
don't have anything worth burning right now.
That feels impossible.
Right.
It feels too scary. Not impossible. Right. It is possible. I have the choice to do it. It just feels incredibly scary right now.
Well, the other part of burning things down that we haven't acknowledged is sometimes there's a hefty amount of cleanup.
Yes, right.
And sometimes when you burn one thing down, another thing grows in its place that you then also have to manage. And it's not even really a burning down so much as it's just a change of a thing that's still there. And that's a kind of a heavy lift. Like, there's usually aftermath. Like, if we want to follow the analogy literally, like, I know people who have had their house burned down, and there's a pretty big adjustment period of finding a place to live while getting a new house, and then getting the new house, and then refurnishing it, and finding a way to call that home. And and then on the other side of all of that, you can find some semblance of peace and routine. And it's a lot. It's a lot to clean up something you burn down. And so, but here's the other thing, though, which is really interesting that you're saying that, because what I tell myself, I think I've said this on the podcast. I know I've said it to you. Maybe I haven't. Maybe I thought it at you. Is the thing that I tell myself when it comes to the things that I'm not doing that I think I want to, is I tell myself, if you aren't doing it, it's because you don't want to. I do not say that to other people, because it is very dismissive of their reasons for not doing a thing. Because obviously, if someone says they want to do something and they're not doing it, there's usually a reason, and that they usually think that reason is a good reason. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. That's not for me to judge, But when I say that to other people in the past, it has come off as a critique of and a dismissal of their reasons.
Yes.
However good they are or aren't for not doing the thing. Which is why I save it for myself. But I do tell myself, if you're not doing it, it's because you don't want to. Because there are times that I've gotten my ass out of bed at 5 a.m. because there was something I wanted to do that there was no other time to do it other than that time. And I had no problem. Wasn't groggy, wasn't cranky. Hit the alarm and went. Any other morning I don't do that is because I don't have something that important for me to wake up to. And like, that's what I use to hold myself accountable, and I also use it to set myself free. Because then I can say, I know I said this on the podcast. There was an episode of Friends where Rachel was asking all the friends to do something, and they all gave an excuse that was a lie. And Phoebe said, I would love to, but I don't want to.
Yeah, right.
And the first time I heard that, of course I laughed. We all laughed, but I was so jealous. I was so jealous of Phoebe's freedom to just fucking say
Her confidence.
Yes. And so now when I hold my own feet to that fire and say, Ryan, if you aren't doing this, it's because you don't really want to. Then I'm free to tell myself to stop telling myself I want to do it. And then I can start telling other people, I'm not doing this because I don't want to. I don't want to. And that can come off as flippant, or like I'm not taking them seriously, or like I don't value them. But honestly, if I don't want to do the thing, then one of those is probably true. And I'd rather them at least know that about me than to try to run around tending to everybody else's emotions, doing what I have to do to make them feel like they matter to me. That's not something I'm signing up for anymore. And so for me, it comes off as a little bit of a dick move sometimes. But for me to just own that I'm not doing something because I don't want to, and being able to voice that to people unapologetically, it's so fucking freeing. It's so easy to set that boundary. Because honestly, it's like you said when you approached me with the request. Like, if I said yes and I didn't want to do it, how good would that end product have been anyway?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, you don't want someone to do something for you who doesn't really want to do it, because they're just going to half-ass it at best. And so it's freeing for the other person as well, for me to just not give a bullshit excuse, not to say, oh, I'm so busy, but just no, I don't want to. Sorry. You know?
But I want to, is that really a dickish move?
It can feel like a dickish move. Like I've got.
But what's your intention?
My intention is to avoid either of us signing up for something that either of us will regret later. You know, and that's an apology I've had to make before too. I had to make this. This was part of me stumbling upon this revelation, because it feels like a revelation, was me committing to something for a friend, thinking, yeah, I can make time to do that. But it wasn't something that lit me up inside. And it wasn't something of consequence. And there wasn't really... He was so understanding when I didn't deliver that there was no consequence for not, internal or external. It didn't matter enough to me for me to just be internally driven to do it. And it wasn't a big enough deal for him to have any type of reaction when I didn't. Like, nobody cared. And so I went to him and I was like, I'm sorry that I ever agreed to do this. It doesn't need to be on my plate, and you can live without anyone doing this. So let's just call it. And he was like, yeah, okay. And then we haven't talked about it since. We're fine. Like, there aren't even any hard feelings, you know? It was freeing for both of us. And so now when someone else makes an ask of my time, that's one of the questions I stop and ask myself. First of all, I'm now in the habit of stopping and asking myself questions, which is new for me. But one of those questions is, are either of us going to regret it later if I say yes to this? And there's no way to know for sure, but you can feel it. You can feel it in your bones. Am I about to say yes to something that I don't really want to do? And do I feel like I have to anyway? And if so, why? Because it is probably pointing to some unhealth in the relationship. So my intention is never to be an ass. And if someone says that I'm being an ass, then what they're really showing is how bad they are at respecting people's boundaries. You know? And that's usually where the conversation quickly turns to.
Sure.
But it still breaks the norm. You know, we talked about apologies last time, and I forgot to mention one of my favorite apologies I've ever seen in a TV show is when, in Scrubs, in one of the first few episodes, where one of the characters hurts another one and then goes back to apologize. And she says, I'm sorry I did that. I shouldn't have done that. And the person receiving the apology said, no, you shouldn't have, but thank you for apologizing. And that's another one of those lines where I'm like, that's how you fucking accept an apology. You know, she was confident enough not to play it down, but she was humble enough not to go on the attack. Two sides of the same coin. Owen just legit said what it was. You owed me an apology and I accept it. You're right, you shouldn't have done it. But there was no hard feeling after that. It wasn't. But if you say that in real life, it's going to seem like such a B-word thing to say, you know? Like you would make them like, because we have such weird twisted ideas and expectations around all these dynamics of just this power dynamics in some of these interactions. But I listened to that and I was like, that's how you accept an apology. You just say what is, confidently, unapologetically, kind of removed. And that's kind of where I'm coming at with my I don't want to. Can you do this for me? No, I don't want to. I'm just saying what is. Naming it so we can both be on the same page. Sorry, I'll stop talking because I know you have stuff.
That when you were talking about the apology, that's the example with my friend last week. Like we have this idea of someone apologizes to us, so we just say, "Oh, it's okay," Right. But instead of confidently saying, "You're right, you shouldn't have done it. Thank you for apologizing," like you're owning, like you hurt me. Yeah, so that's interesting. I want to circle back to people asking about meditating, and I'm going to say this out loud, and then I'm just going to also own the fact that this is what I can do to write my book.
There it is.
Why I haven't thought about this before. Apply my own advice. When I think about, this is a big struggle. I mean, this is one reason why I'm interested in doing the 21-day stillness challenge. Is number one, I don't think that we stay present enough, and that's part of living and aligning with your true north self, is learning to be in the present moment. If you're in the present moment, then you're curious, you're asking questions, you have intention to meet people where they are, meet you where you are, all of it, instead of sitting in the past or sitting in the future. And so you can do that through practice, just like exercise is practice for your body to be fit. Sitting in stillness and meditation is practice for your mind to be still, to be present. And, but I think there's so much wrapped around the idea. This is why I don't call it meditation anymore. Like I don't say it's a 21-day meditation challenge, because there's so much wrapped up in the idea of what meditation is.
Yes.
And it's scary for people, and they think it's a religious thing. And so it's like, I want to be able to pull all of that back, pull all of it out of that, because there are, like, if you want to engage in that, then go find that particular practice. But if somebody's just wanting to learn how to be present, how to kind of be the observer of their thoughts and what's going on in their mind, and recognizing when it's your lizard and your ego and all this stuff, then literally it's just a matter of learning how to be present. And so any advice that I give when people come to me with that is just to start small. Like you're saying, sit for 20 minutes. And if that doesn't work for you, sit for an hour. Like I would never do it. I would never do it. And so, this goes back to, you are your own measuring stick. Just because someone else says that 20 minutes is a great amount of time to meditate, that might not work for you. And it certainly didn't work for me. It was way too daunting and overwhelming when I first started the stillness practice. And so whenever I teach a stillness class, I used to teach one once a month. Literally, we would start for 3 minutes. We did a 3-minute meditation in the class. And if that felt way too overwhelming, then I made them on their self-practice bump it down to 2 minutes. And if it felt great, then they could bump it up to 5 minutes. And then you build on that, right? And so you start with this very small yet doable amount of time. You want to read self-help books, start with 5 minutes a day. You want to write a book, write for 5 minutes, or at least, if that's an outline, if it's an idea, if it's a story you want to add. We have pockets. We have 5 minutes of time. And now, like for me, talking about writing my book, like we also have technology that can help us, where I spend more than 5 minutes in the car alone driving my son to and from school. Like once I've dropped him, then I have the other ride on the way back home. That's more than 5 minutes. There's transcription software where I can literally be writing my book by verbalizing it into my phone while I'm driving. That'll write it all out for me. So it's a matter of like changing. I'm contradicting myself now. I don't have the time. I do. And this is an interesting point. I'm glad I'm talking about this. But it's a matter of shifting your perspective. And I think that's, with people wanting to learn how to sit in stillness, you don't have to know how to do it. The very first hurdle is find 2 to 5 minutes and just sit there. Don't make it anything. Don't think you have to look a certain way. That confidence gains over time. What you're trying to do right now is figure out what it feels like for you. And then realize, and the coolest thing is you get to a point where you've been doing it for a while, a couple weeks or so, and you're like, this doesn't feel like it's doing anything. It's 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. You're like, this doesn't do anything. Stop for 2 days. Just stop for 2 days. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, whoa.
Where'd that thing go? I need to get it back.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's like, form the habit. If you don't think it's doing anything, take a break, and you're going to realize it's doing a whole lot. And then that's when you can get excited. And then you might make room, to get up 15 minutes earlier and start a raw morning practice. And adding some different things like yoga or writing or whatever, floats your boat at that point, but start small.
Yeah. That's one thing that you reminded me of what Stephen Pressfield said in The War of Art, which is you think that inspiration happens before the doing, but it often happens after. Like you wait for the inspiration, you wait for it to be in the mood, or you wait for all the stars to align that's going to put you in a condition where you're going to rock it. But no, you just do the thing, and then through the doing, that's when the inspiration comes. And like you just said, start by doing the thing a little bit, and then once you have a pattern, you have a habit, then you start wanting to do it after you start doing it.
Yeah.
And it's weird how that works. And you kind of like, that's rightfully so. It's met with skepticism a lot of times. But then when people go through the process, like, oh yeah, it took me forever. I took all of spring break to actually have a break. Like everyone talked about all the work that they were doing over spring break because they had all this free time. And I'm like, no, it's free time. It's free time. Like, no. I played with my kid. We cleaned the house. We did, I didn't even think about school. Also, I have a screenplay due at the end of the semester that I hadn't written a single word for. And then at the end of the spring break, taking a break off of thinking about school, I sat down to write a page. And then in 24 hours, that page is now 15 pages. You have to just sit down and decide to do the thing, and then maybe the inspiration happens later. Maybe the want happens later.
But you also made a good point about the break piece.
Yes,
away.
Yes. One of my favorite things to say to people who are not creatively minded is doing the dishes as part of the creative process.
Yeah, right.
All of it is. Oh, and that's the other thing that I was thinking about while you were saying this is we think we don't have time because we think, at least myself, I think I have to do things one at a time. I got a buddy who discovered audiobooks. Now all driving time is reading time.
Exactly.
I think about reading as like I got to sit down with a book and a pen and a reading lamp and nothing else can be going on. No, fuck that. I mean, that is how I operate. I do like reading that way. I also I listen to podcasts all the time, so why wouldn't I listen to audiobooks? I have one of my courses is just a lecture course, and everything he goes over in the lecture is in the review. So I'm there for attendance and for questions and for interaction, blah, 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 blah. But while I'm watching this on Zoom, I'm also working on my demo reel or writing a screenplay or doing something else. Like there are things you do that while you do them, you can do other things. And that comes from investigating your can'ts, saying, I can't do this. Well, why? Why can't you? Is it true that you can't do this? Is it really true? When can you do it? And that's what and sometimes it's good to have a friend who does that. I have a friend who does that. I mean, she did yoga every day for like 4 months, I think, like 120 days straight. And I remember being like, I'm so impressed that you're able to do this that many days unbroken. And she shrugged it off and was like, I just prioritized it. And that right there was almost like, it wasn't meant this way, but I took it as like an indictment on, when you don't do things, you're just not prioritizing them. It's easy. Just prioritize it. Just do it. And sometimes it really is that simple.
It's like if sometimes you want it that bad enough, you'll just do it.
You'll just fucking do it. Yeah, exactly. And if you're not doing it, it's because you don't want to. But then the other thing I want to make sure we say is that it's also okay to not want to.
Yes.
There are projects that I've told myself I would do, or ideas that I've had, and things I'm like, I'm going to do this. I don't have time. Oh, if I don't, and do the whole thing and finally land on, I guess I'm not doing it because I don't want to do it. And again, that's not a bad thing. That's not an indictment. That's not like, shame, shame, shame. You can't do all the things. If you don't want to fucking do it, then that just tells you that that's a piece of information you can use to figure out who you really are, which is the whole point of this whole thing. Oh, I like this. I don't like that. I want this. I don't want that. That's all a self-portrait, which is what we're really after. So embrace the fact that you don't want to do it. And then use that information the next time it pops up on your radar that you may want to do that thing in the future. Like, oh, okay, well, last time I committed to this, I wasn't in it. My heart wasn't in it, and I ended up deciding I didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And that can help you kind of like chart a course that syncs up with who you really are. And it's really easy to set those boundaries when you have that is your why.
Yeah.
I'm glad we landed on this. Humbility,
Not
everybody.
where I thought we would go, but there's humility for you. We'll probably circle back to that because I don't think I explained myself very well, but
That's okay. That episode just wasn't going to happen today anyway.
yeah, no, it wasn't. So there you go. Hopefully people will skip through that first part. What are you grateful for?
What was this?
I know.
I am grateful. Man, see, I was going to say I'm grateful for spring break because it made me write that page. But I'm going to repeat one of my gratitudes, actually. I am grateful that I can read my own screenplay and know how good it is without needing someone else to tell me it's good. And on the same side of that coin, which is why I say confidence and humility are the same thing, is I can also look at my own screenplay and tell where it needs work without needing somebody to pick it apart. Now, that's not to say that I have a full, holistic, all-encompassing, omniscient view of this thing, because I have shown it to a select number of people and I have gotten some feedback, and there are some blind spots and some things I'm like, oh, I didn't see that there, But on the whole, I know what's good about it. And regardless of the feedback I get, I know the parts that are strong and I know the parts that are weak, and I am equipped to address those and to, play to my strengths, and that's all an internal thing. And I'm aware of the fact that sounds really, really prideful, and some might read that as arrogant. But as someone who has depended almost exclusively on the feedback of other people to assess the value and quality of my work, for me to be able to look at something I've made and have what I feel is a pretty accurate picture of its strengths and weaknesses and just kind of like what it is. I'm not going to say it's completely objective because I don't think I'll ever be completely objective about it. But I'm able to look at it and see it for more closely what it is on my own. Mm-hmm. And that's a good feeling. Again, it's freeing. It's I can feel myself detaching in general, not just when it comes to my art, but when it comes to my sense of self and identity and worth. There's like a detaching from a need to have my opinion of myself validated by other people's opinions of myself. Mm-hmm. Not that it's not welcome, and not that it's not helpful, but I'm just repeating myself at this point. What are you grateful for?
Well, I have two things I want to say about that. The first one is if somebody finds that to be arrogant, then they've missed what you've said, because you're not sharing that in a way that you're saying, I know my work is great. You are sharing something that you are grateful for. You're not out there telling the world that your work is good. And so that makes me think like that's an important point to make about the confidence that we're talking about. Is I want to change. I want to be a part of the change where that confidence is just accepted, the good confidence that we talked about last week. Like I want you to be able to say that and not be judged that it's considered to be arrogant. I think we need to change that culture, and I want to be part of that change. I want our show to be part of that change. So
yes,
I'm glad that you shared that's what you're grateful for, because that's something that you're learning, and if that comes across wrong to through someone's ears in the wrong way, then they're not hearing what you're saying, right? So anyway, I'm grateful that you are grateful for that in yourself. But my gratitude for today is I got to work yesterday at the school district that I work for. I was on one of their campuses all day long, working one-on-one with teachers. And it was incredibly heavy. And I'm grateful for that experience, because it just, number one, I'm grateful that the admin at that particular campus recognizes that the mental well-being of their staff is not in the greatest of places. And obviously that not only affects them as educators, but it affects the students too. And so they are finding ways, like bringing me on campus to give them tools to kind of help cope and navigate some of those challenges. And so I'm grateful that that's even on their radar, that they want to care for their people. But then I'm grateful that people were willing to give me their stuff, give me their heavy, and trust me, and be willing to be open to getting some help, right? Even though they're doing the work, they're saying, I'm open, I want some help. And then just grateful for the reminder that what I'm doing is just valid, what I'm doing is necessary, that this is, if I'm alleviating pain for somebody in some way, even if it's one person, just makes me feel incredibly grateful that I have something that I can give them to help them make themselves feel better. And so it was a hard, heavy day yesterday, but I am so grateful that it happened. So
that's huge.
That's where I am. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Yes. All right.
Well, I'm grateful that you were able to show up anyway, because that sounds like it was quite an emotional expenditure. And I know that I definitely need recovery time after what it sounds like you've been through. So.
Well, and it interestingly enough, I typically protect myself, as Tony talks about protecting yourself, but I was rushed yesterday morning trying to get out the door, and I haven't had to be anywhere myself in a while, other than online. So I'm like, oh wow, I actually have to put on real clothes today. And I didn't protect myself, and last night I crashed. And so it was a good lesson. Like, I've got to take the time to protect myself, to be in the highest space, because obviously they need me to be in my highest vibration. Yeah. So
we should do an episode on protecting ourselves and what we mean when we say that.
Yeah, that's been a question that's come up lately. So.
All right. Yeah. Tune in next time for the Humbility Part 2 / protecting yourself. Until next time. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Bye.